What's up, folks? Back with another podcast. It's been a while, but think I got something cooked up pretty good for you guys. Going back to my roots, getting the filterless cigarettes, and now I got a whiteboard, some better equipment. But we're going to be talking about the promised land, all right? And I'm going to start this off with a quote. One of my best teachers in high school, he started his class out with this quote, and it stuck with me. But it goes, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the sea. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I probably didn't pronounce that right, but you get the gist. So, what is our sea? What am I going to try to get y'all to yearn for? The promised land, the land of the milk and honey. All right. What is that? Is it something in the afterlife that we can't really see until we die? Or is it something that we have to work towards, something we have to build towards, right? Can we get it in this life? And that's what I'm going to be arguing. It's a world where there is no hate, no envy, no greed, no judgment, no shame, no guilt, no war, no slaves. All right. Basically a utopia, right? And might sound impossible, all right, but I'm going to lay out how we might be able to accomplish this, right? But this is our destination here, and it is possible. They say anything is possible until you say something, and then they tell you it's impossible. But this is going to be my life's work here. All right. How do we get there? Or more accurately, what or who is in our way? We are slaves. We have owners. Who is our Pharaoh? All right, my reference here is to the book of Exodus, obviously. And this is what this is what Exodus was foreshadowing, right? The Israelites had to escape out of Egypt, from slavery under the rule of Pharaoh who enslaved them, right? So who is our Pharaoh? All right, goes by many names. The deep state establishment, the swamp, as Trump would say, the blob, as Mike Benz would say, corporations, the rich. Basically, those in power whose prosperity is built off of the suffering of others, all right, of the oppressed. You and me, the slaves, right? So, slavery. Back in the day, slaves, they were provided with food, they were provided with shelter, that's all they had, and then they worked all day just for that, right? Nowadays, people are so poor, and we're just continuously getting poorer through inflation and rising prices, rising gas prices, rising everything, right? That through all of our work, we just have enough money to pay rent or pay the mortgage, get groceries, and that's it, right? It's just another form of slavery with extra steps, all right? And as Cat Williams said it, we are all niggas now, all right? Black, white, Republican, Democrat, we're all slaves, all right? This is what should be able to unite us, all right? This is what's evil, all right? So the question is, what is evil? Is there a great evil in this world, right? And I would define evil as really, to put it in human terms, like regarding humans, those who, build their success and their happiness off of the suffering of others, right? That's the great evil, right? They're willing to kill, murder, steal, do whatever it takes to make them happy, regardless of who they have to hurt in the process, all right? So how do we defeat this great evil, all right? First, we must unite, all right? A house divided cannot stand. That's how they stay in power, all right? They have us fighting between each other, all right? Republicans versus Democrats, Christians versus Muslims versus Jews, all this just to get us divided. That way we're so busy bickering with ourselves and we don't really unite to face our real problem, which is our slave owners, all right, our Pharaoh, all right? So we gotta unite Christians, Muslims, Jews, atheists, agnostics, Buddhists, black, white, Republican, Democrat. We are all slaves, all right? This is what unites us. And we need to build camaraderie, brotherhood, right? This is the biggest thing that I miss from the military, all right? This is what I loved about the military is the brotherhood, you know, people willing to lay down their lives for their brothers, all right? That's what we need, okay? Simultaneously, we must change, all right? We have to change the way we think. We need to repent, all right? We got to become smarter, stronger, and fearless. This is what Nietzsche called the Übermensch, all right? We must become Übermenschen, all right, which translates to overmen, all right? His way of going about it was a little different, but I'm going to build up off of his ideas. It's basically somebody who tears down the values that they were raised with, that they were instilled with, all right, this slave morality, if you will, and to create their own values, all right, becoming free instead of having society tell us who we are and what we should be. We decide what we are and what we should be. Freedom, all right, free to pursue happiness, all right, the opposite of slavery, all right. So if men were angels, no government would be necessary. One of our founding fathers, James Madison, said this, all right. I'm definitely going to use this in a way that he did not intend, but I want to make a point here, all right. He says if men were angels, no government would be necessary. That's correct. What I'm trying to do is to make all men into angels, all right? Have people become the best versions of themselves that they can be. Selfless, not selfish. Putting the needs of others above their own, all right? If we had a world full of these people, we'd have a utopia. People that wouldn't judge each other, people that wouldn't hate each other, people who wouldn't envy each other. All right, no more war, no more fighting, no more greed, no more building your wealth off of the backs of others. All right, no more slavery. All right, and those who don't want to become angels, those who want to cling to their power, who want to continue to build their enjoyment off the suffering of others, those who do not want to repent, we're going to have to get rid of them. All right. There's no other way around this. Like with a garden, all right? If you don't pluck out the weeds of a garden, it's going to turn into a wilderness pretty soon. We have to pluck up these weeds, root and stem. So that's the whole process. And this is also an internal process. Back to changing the way we think. We are also our own Pharaoh, all right? We're a slave of our own minds. You know, we can't break out of this programming that we were raised with, all right? We become tyrants of ourselves. We have to free ourselves through our minds. The Eastern philosophy goes over this extensively, and it's a large process, but this goes back to becoming an Übermensch. This is a path that you have to take on your own, all right? What I'm here to do is just to inspire you to reach for the stars, to get there, all right? Basically, we're just finishing the job of Jesus here, all right? This is our generation. It's finally now. You have to believe that. If you don't believe that, it's not going to be done. All right, back to the story of Moses. Moses' generation wasn't allowed to enter the promised land because they didn't believe. They didn't believe that they could beat the giants. All right, and as a consequence, they weren't allowed to enter the promised land. So the generations of old, our parents, they're not going to make it. All right, you can't teach an old dog a new trick. It's our generation that's going to have to finally break the cycle and make a world that's worth living in. All right, because the world we have right now, most people would rather die than live in it. All right, that's how a lot of people are feeling. It shouldn't be that way, and it's in the ball's in our court. All right, it's up to us to change things. All right, we need a movement started here. We need to unite. We need to fix these things ourselves. Nobody's coming to save us. All right, I'm tired of waiting. We have to do it. All right, so this is everything. All right, basically, I didn't talk about it because, it's hard to define. It's a society built on love, and we'll try to get into that in a later podcast. We'll also try to get into, psychological aspects of this, like what does it take to become a better person? We'll be diving into psychology, philosophy, and different things, all right? But yeah, that's it. Hope you all enjoyed. Take it easy.